There was a birthday girl, and she was 12 years old, and she had her birthday party. The birthday party had come and gone, and it was time for her to write the thank you notes. And her mom had been on the little girl's case to write those thank you notes. So the girl finally sat down and did her duty. She was writing a thank you note to her aunt who lived out of state, and her aunt sent a lovely pin cushion that looked like a little strawberry. And although that pin cushion was wonderful and that girl was learning to sew, it wasn't exactly a 12-year-old's dream present. So the little 12-year-old girl sat down and wrote a note, and it said, "Dear Aunt May, thank you for the pincushion. It is just what I wanted, but not very much." You can write someone a thank you note, but you can't make them very thankful. In a few more days, it's going to be Thanksgiving. By presidential proclamation, the president will declare it a holiday, and everyone will celebrate the holiday of Thanksgiving. But not everyone will give thanks. For some, it'll be just another day off. Giving thanks is a choice we make. Thanksgiving has far more to do with the reality inside us than with the reality around us. Circumstances do not produce gratitude. We all know people who have had a great life, but they complain about everything around them. I have a friend of mine, Steve, and Steve, he gets a new car, and after about 3 months, he starts complaining about it. And then after about a year, he trades in his new car and gets another car. And after about 3 months, he starts to complain about it. And he does the same with where he lives. He lives in the inner city of Houston for a while, and then he doesn't like the traffic and the hustle and bustle of the inner city life, and he moves out to the suburbs. And then he's there for 3 or 4 years and doesn't like the suburbs. And then where does he move back to? The inner city. Over and over again. But we also know people who have had problem after problem after problem, and they still give praise to God. My friend Patricia this last year has been in the hospital more time and longer than she can count. First it was for her knee. Then she had to have a pacemaker put in, but it got an infection in it, so she had to have it put in on the other side and fight the infection. And then she had an infection in her knee, and she's just been in day after day after day. And every time I go see her, she still gives praise to God. Gratitude has far more to do with what's inside than what's on the outside. The Apostle Paul, he knew about this. He was criticized and betrayed. He was attacked. He was beaten. He was stoned and imprisoned. Enemies caused him to live under the threat of death. For Paul, the outside was a pretty bad place. But somehow Paul was filled with thanksgiving on the inside. Paul said, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Thanks be to God. Give thanks in all circumstances." Paul was in Thessalonica. This place was a bustling seaport city. I think we're going to have a map of it soon. It was around the Gulf. You can see it right up toward the top right there, and right where it says Macedonia right below that. It was an important trade center. It was the capital and the largest city in Macedonia. It was a communications center. It was on the junction, at the junction of the road leading to the Danube. And here was Paul in the middle of Thessalonica trying to start a new church, and then suddenly Paul had to leave quickly and without much warning. And his new church that he was starting had some Jews in it who were familiar with religious faith, but it also had in it a lot of Gentiles and folks who were new and recent converts to the faith. They had no support. They had fear of persecution for their faith in Jesus Christ. And so Paul writes this letter to the Thessalonians to encourage the new converts in faith, to encourage them during their trials, to give them instruction on godly living, to give them some assurance that Christ is going to come again and that they should have some hope. Paul wanted those believers in the Thessalonian church to have gratitude and thanksgiving, even in their doubts, even in their fears, even in their lack of faith. Isn't that what happened at the first Thanksgiving? Kind of happened that way, right? There was a rough time at sea. They ended up at the wrong destination. There was sickness. They didn't have enough to eat. We always tell the story about that they had 5 kernels of corn to ration out amongst them, right? There was a severe winter. And they started out with about 100 people and ended up at the end of that time with about 50 people. And they had a choice to make. They could huddle together and be bitter, or they could celebrate with those that survived. What did they do? They looked for the blessings. The blessings. There's a man who took a tour of Yellowstone Park, National Park, of the Grand Tetons, and he was with the tour, and the tour guide was showing him all of the places in Yellowstone Park, and so he was with this tour group, and as the tour guide was showing him around, there was nothing that impressed him. He looked at the beautiful hills, and he said, "Oh, just some old mountains." As they went by, he was like, "Well, this is all right." Finally, the tour guide had had enough with his offhanded comments about this beautiful place, and he said, "Mister, if you haven't got it on the inside, then you sure ain't going to see it on the outside." That's pretty true, right? You know, you can look at a beautiful sunrise in Corpus Christi and be awed and amazed by it out on the bay. Or you can say, "Man, it's going to be another hot day out there." You can worship in this beautiful sanctuary with its wonderful music and its lovely stained glass that is awe-inspiring to be. You can feel the Spirit of God and that which makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. While you worship here today, you can have that experience. Or you can go home pretty unaffected by it all. Gratitude is a choice. Gratitude is a choice of every person. The story's told of parents, and these parents, they had 2 sons. One son was really negative and an eternal pessimist. The other son was really, really positive and the eternal optimist. And the parents were worried that their sons would have a really distorted view of life. And so they went to a counselor for help, and the counselor thought about it and said, "Yeah, I can help you, but my treatment's going to be kind of radical. But if you're willing to go along with it, I think it's going to work." And so the counselor said, "Christmas is coming. For the pessimist, I want you to buy him this wonderful 4-wheeler with all the bells and whistles and put a big giant bow on it. He'll see this present and be so happy by seeing it that he can't help but have a wonderful Christmas. And that'll cure him. And then the counselor said, for the optimist, the one who sees everything great, I want you to give him a simple box of manure. There's nothing that you can find good in that. And so, Christmas happened. On Christmas Day, the pessimist opened his brand new four-wheeler with the big bow on it, and he said, I don't like that color, and it's going to be hard to steer. I don't like this present at all. And the optimist, he was jumping up and down and shouting for joy, hooray, hooray. With this manure here, there's got to be a pony around here somewhere. If you constantly expect the worst, you can't live the best. This is important. What you look for in life, you will find. What you look for in life, you will find. We pass by blessings every day around us. We complain over the little things in our life. We exaggerate our problems. We create problems when there are none there. We complicate our lives when they don't need to be that way. What you look for, you'll find. There's an old hymn out there, an old hymn called Count Your Blessings. Count Your Blessings tells us a little bit about what you look for, you'll find. It says this, when upon life's billows you are tempest-tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. You can't control what life sends your way. Life can be pretty difficult, and sometimes it's hard to find the blessings, and sometimes it's hard to be thankful to God. And sometimes the blessings and the thanks even comes afterwards. But for Paul, the keystone of faith was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If God could turn a crucifixion into a resurrection, then God can turn a defeat into a victory in our lives too. And that's what Paul was telling the church at Thessalonica. Even in difficulty, God is here at work in our life, and God will bring the final victory through Jesus Christ. Paul says, in every circumstance, say, God is in the business of bringing something good out of this. And if you can believe that, then there's nothing that can defeat you. You know, my grandma, Ida Mae Kennedy, my grandma Kennedy, she knew that and I think believed in that more than anyone I knew. She grew up orphaned in a Masonic home. When she was an adult, she worked full-time when most women at that time didn't work full-time outside of the home. She miscarried her first child. She worried about her husband if he would come back from the war. She got lung cancer, even though she didn't smoke. Outside, somebody might look at her and think she had very little to be thankful for. But inside, she knew that God was in the business of doing good in her life. She knew what Paul knew in the Bible. And so she lived every day thanking God for the blessings that she had in all of her circumstances. You know, my grandma, she could party me under the table. She could stay up and dance and have a good time with her friends till 2 a.m. You see, Thanksgiving doesn't come from your external circumstances. Thanksgiving is a choice that you make in your heart. What you look for, you will find. Count your many blessings. See what God has done. Like Paul, choose to give thanks in all circumstances. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Amen.